Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis show, man. All right, and behind the scenes stuff. Cameron and I were just talking. Are we listening out? I mean, we're definitely taxing the Otis memory genes here, or by listing out all our themes for each month. But they do build on each other. So if you want to
hmm
skip forward, just hit that button that says 15 seconds skip. I'll be done by then. So,
Let's see
theme
it.
for the year.
I'm timing you.
All right, theme for the year 2021 is focus. January was beginnings, get started. February, clarity. March, prepare. And now April, obstacles. And obstacles, we talked about the anti tank ditch. Man, I can't, sorry. It's the engineer in me. That was a fun time in my life. Not that I haven't had other fun times, but that was some fun times making those things and then blowing them up too. Uh, but something popped up this week with me talking with some folks, clients, and some potential clients, just general chatting. And this person in particular identified time and money as the obstacles for their achievement of their purpose. And I just found that, more I kind of sit back and chew on that. And no, those of you who know me, I did not yell at them. Uh, I did not say "suck it up, Buttercup, and move," which I have said to some of my clients in the past. But I
Mhm.
didn't say that this time because I was trying to be nice. I didn't know the person that well, but I did
Well,
have to.
then, what was your? I was just gonna say, what was your first reaction when they list those as obstacles? Because I've got a gut reaction. I
Oh,
wanted to hear yours first, though.
my first reaction is quit your whining. Quit your whining. Those are only obstacles if you allow them to be obstacles because they are tools
Yep.
and that's all they are. And guess what? The time is my favorite one. Man, you know what? I don't care whether you're Bezos, Mr. Amazon, Frank, Facebook, Zuckerberg dude, and Musk. You know what the great equalizer is for everybody? Whether you're on welfare or a multi gazillionaire, time. Ain't nobody got any more. I don't care how much money you got, you ain't buying anymore. There's 24 hours in a day, there's 7 days in a week, and there's 365 days in a year, unless it's a leap year, and then you get one extra day. But you know what? Everybody gets that extra day.
Yes,
It's
sir.
the great equalizer. What do you do with your time? Time is a tool. Time is to be used as an advantage and ain't an obstacle.
hmm when you first brought this up before the show, and this I really like this because generally we talk through things a little bit more before the show, but this one it's a little bit more of a genuine reaction. And for me, that's just a constraint, and it is the first constraint you look at. Time, like okay, I'm planning out a project. Let's go back to our project management. You're planning out the first constraint that you're going to look at is time. There's money; those things all matter. Money, workload, man hours, all that different stuff matters. But just time itself, that is the one constraint that we all get to work with. And I'm going to call back a few months, actually, I think, to an episode we had a little while back, Dad. We were talking about playing to the constraints that are in front of you and playing to the field that's in front of you, right? And I asked you a question about if I told you you had $1 million budget, or we'll make it easier, $2 million budget. We had a $2 million budget, and I only gave you 400,000 of that. That's 20%. Would you do well in your business? No, you might struggle that first year, and that's my fault. But on the second year, if you remember, it was your fault because you still are only getting that 20%. You still only understand you're getting that 20%. That's like going out and getting a job to pay your rent and forgetting to subtract out taxes and whatnot. And then be like, oh my gosh, I'm out of money. No, you should have seen that coming. That is part of the constraints of what's happening in front of you. These are all aspects of just regular life that you got to look at. And, to me, complaining about time and money as obstacles to overcome, what I really think is there is an obstacle there. They're totally right. But it's a mental obstacle that they're putting in front of themselves, that they're saying, I do not have the time. I can't get this all done. I don't have the money for this. Instead of looking at it from a way of, this is what I do have. These are my constraints that I have to work inside of. How am I going to move forward no matter what?
I'm going to flip it on its head. Time is not a constraint. Time is an advantage. And if you think of time as your advantage, that's a whole nother thing of looking at it. You know, when I was planning ops back in the day, when I was a cool guy, used to do cool guy things, time was always a constraint. You know, we do our planning thing and we nail it all out, or, you know, our mission analysis. And one of the constraints that was always came up was time. But I just wonder if I was to pull out some of those ops that we did, if I flipped it and I didn't list time as a constraint, but I listed it as an advantage. And that's a whole nother way of looking at what's going on. Because remember, this is all about perceptions. Obstacles, an obstacle to you is not an obstacle to somebody else. They've already got it figured out, or they just naturally overcome it, right? They don't even have to exercise that muscle.
I got the easy example to paint this one. We're driving up somewhere. I'm in my truck. My fiance's in her little Nissan. There's a curb. That's an obstacle to her. She ain't getting over that curb. I just got to straighten the wheels. Go slow. That's easy. It's all about perspective of what you're looking at for obstacles.
But that is old Gray. So, I mean, she's still cooking at 25
yes,
years. Yeah.
25 years. 238,000 miles later.
Old Gray's still going.
Yeah, but that paints the picture perfectly. That an obstacle is only an obstacle from your perspective. When you're looking at it, there's always going to be a way around it, and you know it's really about flipping that perspective when you're looking at these sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking the other night about take us a little bit off subject, but why it's important to be part of a group, a tribe, a team. And that's because I'm over here banging my head against this brick wall, trying to get through it. And I'm just banging my head. And because I'm banging my head on this brick wall, I can't see what else is happening around me. But if I got a team that's supporting me, they can pick me up, lift me over the wall, or better yet, my favorite, the Green Beret method. Hey, there's a door over there, dude. You know, play smarter, not harder, right? That's what it's about. And when we look at obstacles as something that is hindering us, preventing us, then guess what it does? You ask and you receive. That's what's happening. I don't have enough time in the day, really. I guarantee if we sat down, did what I call a manpower analysis of yourself, and you logged every minute of every day of what you spent doing, I'd be willing to bet we find all kinds of time when you're off dilly-daddling, streaming some favorite show, because I really got to catch this next episode.
You know, you're right. But actually, I'm going to change that a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because what I think a lot of people lose their time on, and that's, you know, a weird figure of speech, lose your time, but is they look at their to-do list, they look at their outcomes, they look at their goals, whatever it is that they're measuring themselves off of, and they sit there and freak out about getting it all done. And the longer you do that, the longer you worry about what you're going to do next and what time you're going to do this and what time you're going to do that, the less you're actually working. And the more that you just put your head down and just go, okay, next thing on the list, let's go. All right, this one, do it. Knock it out. Okay, next thing. The more you do that, the more you just get into a workflow. Success builds on success. You start moving forward and you knock out things that if you were sitting there planning, you would have given yourself hours to do, and you're knocking them out in 45 minutes. Because it goes back to the real problem with that, aside from just wasting the time at the beginning of the day, is the whole planning fallacy. A project will always expand to the time allotted for the project. If you give yourself an hour to write a social media post for your business, it'll take you an hour. And maybe most of that hour will be you scrolling through Instagram, wasting time or something, but you will expand it to that because you already allowed yourself to do it. But if you're just looking at your to-do list as, I just got to get the next thing done, next thing done, next thing done, and you just keep going through that way, you're eliminating that obstacle of the planning fallacy.
All right. Well, since you said that, and I know where you got it from, we just got to give a shout out to DOL Coach and their team of project management instructors, because I guarantee that's where you got that little thing of how a project expands to the time allocated to it. And to go back to that, that's brother Scott Kinder. Check him out at dolcoach.com and learn how to really run a project. Mm-hmm. Unpaid advertisement, again, kind of like the burger thing, but that's because I believe in it. And those burgers,
just like burgers.
Yeah. Oh, they taste good. That's right. Miss Suzanne and I are already planning our stop over. Hey, but what I wanted to jump back to in that, what you were talking about in that feeling of being overwhelmed is this great Stoic quote from Seneca that says, "To bear trials with a calm mind robs fortune of its strength and burden." Mm-hmm. Because what's happening, man, it's like, oh my God, I got all these things to do, and I'm not sure. What's that? And that sure as heck ain't calm. But when we take that moment, we break the cycle, break that spiral. I always refer to it, how do you step out of that spiral, however you do it. And I've got all kinds of techniques and processes that I've applied and I've taught people, and then other people have taught me. But break that spiral and cycle, take that moment, step out of the cycle, and look at it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. That's how you change the perspective on those obstacles, and whether or not it's an obstacle to stop you, hinder you, slow you, or just something to get over. All about that in your head.
And I think the easiest way to flip your perspective on things is something I do a lot of. You could talk to anyone who works for me with Verbi. This is my favorite pastime as a leader, is thought experiments. I don't give two craps how unrealistic the thing is I'm laying out in front of you and how unlikely it is. I want to hear what we think about it. Because when you flip your perspective, even to something ridiculous, you're going to pull some sort of valuable information out of that. You know, I was talking with one of our event planners yesterday. We're putting together a Dungeons and Dragons game night. Basically, that's all I could call it because I don't know too much about it. But we're going through and we got this whole business model put out. And I was like, cool. So how do we make it free? And he goes, what? We can't make it free. I was like, okay, but explore that. Talk to me tomorrow and say, what would it look like if it was free? It might be a terrible business idea, you know, or it could be, hey, you know, well, if we got 10,000 people doing it free and 2% of them wound up paying, then it would work, or whatever it comes out to. But it takes that flipped perspective of, you know, same thing goes for if your constraint is time and you're worried about, okay, do I have enough time to get this done? What would your life look like if that's all you did? What would your life look like if you quit your job just to go work on this new business or this new project, whatever it is? And that doesn't mean you have to go do it, but it provides you that perspective of, okay, what could this look like? And really, the reason I love thought experiments so much is because it kind of paints these three different points that you can triangulate the truth off of, really. Of okay, this is one extreme, this is another extreme, this is another extreme. Out of those three, you can learn from those extreme situations and apply it to a realistic one. Whether it's not having any time, not having any money, having all the time, having all of the money, whatever it is, you can learn from those type of things. I don't know if you've ever done this. I do this occasionally. Hey guys, we got $10 million. What are we doing? Just a fun little, take 15 minutes, just be like, okay, hey, we just got a check for $10 million. What are we going to do as a business? And just run with it. See what kind of ideas you come up with. Because I could guarantee you some of those ideas you don't need $10 million for.
Well, and that's a great segue to talk about that same, you know, when we started the show, time and money. Mm-hmm. Money is the same thing. Money is a tool. There are all kinds of ways to work around whatever that problem is, whether it's, you know, you go get a part-time job or you get a loan or, you know, even worse, you know, than a loan is, you know, rack up credit cards. But with that belief that money is a tool to help you get to success. Money is a tool to accelerate you, because if you plan it without revenue, with just, you know, let's say you're starting a business like what you did with Verbi. It's a great example. Hey, I'm going to get these investors, and with these investors, going to do all this. And then you step back and went, well, you know, that investor thing is kind of, it's good, but it's not really what I need and what I really have to have. we can do it this way without a big chunk of money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And those businesses that start off that way, the bootstrap businesses, are always more successful than the VC businesses. I don't know what the stats are, but I tell you what, my gut, and it ain't wrong very often, my gut tells me that the bootstrapped, because there's so much more investment and time tied to it,
Mm-hmm.
is much better approach for your business or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in life.
Oh yeah. You know, it's organic growth is the way I would look at it. When you're bootstrapping something, you're kind of getting that organic growth where it's building on itself as you go. And when you throw money at a problem, it can work really well if the money keeps coming. And that's really what it comes down to, is if you take that $10 million and you start going with something, if you don't have it planned out right to where you're pacing yourself on that, you're going to run out of that kind of money because you're just going to be burning through it. That's the other aspect, you know, going back to Scott's words of wisdom. That's the other aspect of the planning fallacy. It's not just time that your project will expand to, it's money. If you give, you know, $10,000 for a specific project to one of your employees, they're not going to spend $5,000, even if that's all they needed. They're going to spend $10,000. They're going to find a way.
Oh yeah. Well, having worked for the government for many years in my life, I can tell you that number one, the government solution is to throw money at the problem. Mm-hmm. And it ain't fixed nothing yet. I don't know what the total is, probably over $1 trillion that we've spent, not even counting the lives we've lost in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And it's still a shithole.
Yep.
It's still a place that is not going to be fixed in the next 50 years. So throwing money at something doesn't necessarily fix it. And
well,
then
it's just like a business model. If you don't have the actual plan, doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, no matter what it is. You can't just buy success. You have to have a plan built in.
Well, and I was just going to say the other thing that we did in the government, you know, the government fiscal year ends on 30 September. Well, guess what we started doing about mid-August? Spending all the time shooting every bullet that we had, and anything that was left in our budget, we were buying stuff, mm-hmm. whether it was knives or scopes or whatever. We were spending it because, you know what? If we don't spend all this money,
they're going to cut it.
Next year, they're not going to give us as much. So, and then what's the government do? Oh, you spend all that money? We better give you 20% more next year. Yeah.
But, you know, this really gets into with time and money. The reason we're painting the story with these different situations here is to kind of illustrate that the fallacy that is considering those to be obstacles, because they're not obstacles. They're, you know, they're either constraints or tools, depending on which way you want to look at them. I think both of those are totally valid thought processes. And I think both are valid in different situations. There's probably benefits to both of them, right? But it comes down to the fact that they're not obstacles, and the obstacles that you're painting are the ones in your own mind. And it's you looking at these things and saying, I can't do it because of some BS assumption. That's what it really comes down to. And so that would be my big piece of advice. And then we already said this, but if you're finding yourself in that situation, try one of these Camden thought experiments that I'm throwing out. Say, okay, well, what if I got $10 million to do this? What if money wasn't an object? What if I didn't have to go to work every day and spend 8 hours there? What would I do? And start exploring those things and look at it from a different perspective, because really those obstacles are only an obstacle if you let them be. You know, with Verbi, I'll use that as an example. If I was trying to hire 15 full-time employees right now, money would be a huge obstacle for me. So I'm not trying to hire 15 full-time employees. Boom, obstacle solved. It's just a simple perspective switch of that's obviously not the right move for me right now. You know, for me, this kind of goes back to, and this is just my philosophy on this. I think there's different versions of it, but when something's happening like that and you reach these obstacles, look at it as, why is that obstacle there? What can you learn from this? How can you change your perspective to grow as an individual or as a business for this? I say to myself all the time when something comes up like that, amor fati, love your fate. there's a reason that this happened in front of me right now. I don't know what it is yet, but it's my job to try to find the reason inside of that obstacle.
Well, it's so you can't say amor fati without me talking about the Stoic quote about being prepared in life like a wrestler and not a dancer. And the reason for that, so most people think wrestlers all tensed up, ready to go. But really, if you think about what's a good wrestler do, they maneuver with what comes towards them. Because a good wrestler in a good wrestling match is fighting somebody, wrestling somebody that is equal to them. And the way that they overcome them is not through overpowering, but is through skill and technique and using that other person's attacks, if you will, to their own advantage. But I want to go back because I want to make one more point on the money thing. Because if you believe money is holding you back, or the lack of money is holding you back, I challenge you to do the same thing with money, as I said earlier, with your time. Do the Dave Ramsey thing and do a budget right down to the penny and see where you're spending money. Because you know what? That $5 coffee or a $4.50 hibiscus tea yesterday afternoon, those things add up. I mean, if you really want this thing, if you really want to achieve this, whatever it is, there are means of creating and gaining and using money as a tool instead of as a disadvantage. So
I love that. Well, the reason I love that is because it paints such a great picture for me on the two different levels. One's the business side of, okay, you know, what are we really doing big picture wise? Where can we move money around? All those type of things. What do we really have to be spending? That's the harder one to wrap your head around, because people don't, you know, it's more complicated. But what came to mind for me was my good friend Norman, my good friend and business partner Norman. I got a record player out here, and I was complaining that I don't have some records. And he said, dude, you got Canes yesterday. Spent $10 at Canes. A Buddy Guy record costs $10. How many times are you going to play that Buddy Guy record? That's it. Just flip the perspective. These things are equivalent. You know, you gave me, and it's going to sound funny because you gave me this advice when I was pretty young, but you mentioned a friend at Texas A&M who accounted everything in a pack of beer. And it's just
that wasn't a friend. That was your pawpaw. When your pawpaw was in college, he and his buddy would measure the value of everything against a 6-pack of beer.
So I did get the Otis memory genes, is what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's right. It runs downhill, unfortunately.
But that's an interesting perspective to start taking on things. You know, whatever your 6-pack of beer is, challenge your perspective on how you're spending that money, on how you're spending that time, and see how you could spend it better. You know, and the quick one, and I'll do this as fast as I can because it's a long one. Going back to my developmental economics days here at U of A, agriculture is a big piece of development economics. So you study a lot of that when you're in agricultural economics and business classes, right? And what you see a lot is in all these developing countries, there's farmers or, you know, tailors or these different workers who are making like $15 a day in US dollar equivalent, but they're spending $10 a day on a loan to get a cart to haul their fruit. And then they're spending that $5 on tea because there's a cultural significance on tea. And what they realize is if you get an intervention to just go in and flip their perspective on things and say, hey, dude, lay off the tea for 1 week, you can buy a cart. You're not paying a $10 rent daily on a cart anymore. And then these people can get out of poverty. But it's when you're stuck there and you're just rolling with the punches and you're not stepping back and challenging your perspective, you're not going to be able to change anything.
Well, it just reminds me of a good old fashioned country song. I owe my soul to the company store. The line and I mean that's what that is.
It's the same thing, same exact thing that was happening with the company stores here in the U.S. is what's happening over there with the farmers.
Yeah, 100%. Man, well, I tell you what, you know what I learned? I learned that there's a Camden thought experiment. We've coined a new technique quote unquote, the Camden Thought Experiment is it's a pretty cool thing. I think that's fun to do. And it's a great thing to get your team thinking outside the box. Don't just think about in a linear sense of our business. That's that, like you and I talked about the other day about hitting that home run. Well, you can't plan to hit a home run, or you can't hit a home run if you don't plan to hit a home run. There we go.
Right.
Messed up that one. But that's what you're doing with the Camden Thought Experiment. Hey, what if somebody came by and, we won the lotto as a business and
right,
gave us a $10 million grant or whatever. Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is what we do, or whatever,
Yeah.
So, what'd you learn?
I was just going to add on to that. And of course, do not spend too much time in thought experiment land. I think that, I don't know if that needed to be said, but don't spend too much time fantasizing about that $10 million check. Because as much as useful as that thought experiment is, $10 million check ain't coming. It probably not. That I'd never heard that business story. I don't know if you have, Dad.
Well, and that's only one of the many things that go into the experiments. That's just one.
Right.
There's a bunch of others that you can put into the same.
Oh, yeah. But what I learned, and I thought it was a really interesting perspective you provided, was time as an advantage. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it because it's an equalizer. We all have the same amount of time every single day. And it's about what do you do with that time? How are you going to spend it? And how efficient are you going to be? And really, when it comes down to time, I don't think we ever said this directly, but it comes down to what are your priorities? What is it that you want to get out of your day? How are you going to build it around that? And I think time as an advantage is a really interesting way of thinking about time rather than a constraint.
Awesome, man. Yeah, good stuff. And now I'm torn on what to call the show. I guess we'll have to see what comes out. Time is an advantage, or Pawpaw and a six-pack.
I think my money's on B there.
Yeah. All right, Camden, run it out.
Okay. Thank you all again for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our sponsors, Verbi Virtual Events and Tribe and Purpose. Find your purpose, build your tribe. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.